Welcome back to Golden Fortune Leo, the corner of the internet where we retire glittery horoscopes and replace them with a clear-eyed conversation about how the sky maps onto your nervous system, your choices, and your relationships. I'm your longtime researcher, the one who has logged too many coffees and not enough naps, studying how Leo energy doesn't merely illuminate a room but teaches everyone else where the light switch is. And today we are diving into the week of October 13th to 19th, 2025, a chapter that feels like déjà vu with better lighting and wiser casting, because yes, Leo, here we go again, and no, it's not a cosmic prank so much as a graduate seminar in discernment, complete with a familiar face who suddenly realizes the curtain never truly fell and now steps back onto your stage without the bravado. Just honest tremor in the voice. The headline is simple, the ending you grieved may have been an intermission, and the real question is not what the other person will do but who you are when the lights go up. The guiding influence here is Temperance, the major arcana's therapist and chemist in one, and in psychological terms this card is your prefrontal cortex coaching your amygdala, asking whether you can hold two truths at once. Yes, you are powerful. And yes, patience is still part of power because for a sign that leads with courage and warmth, temperance can feel like a speed bump on a road you built yourself, but it is not punishment, it's a refinement process, like reducing a sauce until the flavor is unmistakable, and that's the work before you now, alchemy, not delay, transmuting the heat of anger, longing, and pride into the clarity of wise action. Many of you are negotiating peace with someone who once set your sky on fire, and the universe is less interested in whether you say yes or no than in how you make the decision. In therapy language, we could call this moving from attachment reenactment to secure functioning, and in social terms, it is the difference between performing love and practicing it. In Buddhist teaching, it's the pivot from craving to mindful presence, where you stop demanding closure from the outside world and manufacture it within, closing the door softly, sweeping the floor, and choosing peace as if it were a daily chore rather than a dramatic speech. And because this is the year of triumph 2025, your victory is measured by nervous system calm, not by the number of apologies collected like trophies on a mantle. If someone returns now, and many of you will feel the knock before it sounds, remember the difference between a plot twist and a pattern. The first is growth, the second is a rerun, and to tell them apart you don't need prophecy, you need boundaries. Ask the practical questions no candlelit reconciliation ever volunteers. What changes will we each make, by when, and how will we measure them? Because in real life love is not just a feeling, it's a calendar entry. Humor will help here. Think of yourself as the dignified host of your own talk show, inviting a guest back for a second interview, gracious but prepared, cards on the desk, questions sharpened, commercial breaks scheduled, because charm without accountability is just a long ad, and if you catch the old fear rising, am I too much, too bright, too demanding, remember that people who confuse your self-trust with arrogance are narrating their own insecurity, not your identity, and the sun doesn't apologize for dawn. Temperance also corrects the Leo blind spot, the tendency to give like royalty and then feel quietly resentful when the court behaves like tourists. The fix is simple, if not easy. Give with agreement instead of assumption, state your needs before you're hurt, and treat your attention like a precious metal, mined with effort and invested with care. In practice that means fewer grand gestures and more consistent rituals, fewer speeches about loyalty and more small, steady acts that prove it. Because sustained warmth is what Leo does best when self-respect holds the thermostat. If your heart still wants this, fine, let it. Let's travel back, Leo, to the part of your story that still glows in memory, the chapter when everything was golden, when laughter filled the air like sunlight caught in a prism. In that season, you were dancing in the energy of the Page of Wands, the Queen of Wands, and the Four of Wands, a trio that celebrates inspiration, self-assurance, and shared joy. You built something vivid with another soul, maybe a relationship, maybe a dream, maybe a creative alliance that felt destined. There were late-night talks that stretched until dawn and the giddy certainty that you were both co-authors of the same fairytale. But even the sun, your celestial ruler, must eventually set, and what follows daylight is the test of warmth without light. For some of you, that love began with fire and ended in smoke, leaving you blinking in the twilight, wondering how something so bright could fade so quietly. You gave everything: your time, your energy, your humor, your weekend plans, and the other person hesitated, paralyzed by the intensity you offered so naturally. Leos have this magnificent flaw: you think loving deeply is your civic duty. You hand people torches when all they wanted was a candle, and then you wonder why they flinch from the heat. The truth is that many people admire the flame until it touches them. Your confidence can act like a mirror, and not everyone enjoys seeing their own dimness reflected back. So you ended up doing most of the emotional heavy lifting, turning a duet into a solo. There may have been subtle betrayals, small evasions that multiplied into mistrust, text messages left unanswered, plans that evaporated, promises that dissolved under scrutiny. Yet you kept the faith, because Leos rarely abandon a story midway. Hope, for you, is both virtue and addiction. You believed one more grand gesture, one more sincere talk, one more chance to be understood might restore the spark. But the universe had a different curriculum in mind. That connection was never about the other person, it was a spiritual gym membership. Every disappointment added resistance, and every tear became part of your strength training until self-worth emerged like muscle memory. The ache in your chest was simply proof that the heart had been working out. From a psychological standpoint, that relationship taught you about projection, how we often fall in love with our own potential reflected in someone else's eyes. From a Buddhist view, it was attachment disguised as destiny. The lesson was not to stop loving but to love without clinging. Humor helps here. Think of it this way: you were the star of a romantic comedy that slowly revealed itself to be a self-help documentary, and the moral was know thyself, preferably before dating thyself in human form. Now, in the present moment, the universe flips the script and hands you the judgment card. This is not celestial bureaucracy, it's a spiritual audit. Judgment arrives when the soul decides it's tired of reruns. You've reached the point where the story cannot proceed as it once did. The familiar character may reappear texting "Hey, stranger" with the bravery of someone sending a flare into enemy territory, or you may simply sense their energy hovering near, like the faint echo of a song you once overplayed. They too are awakening, realizing that there was one last chance to show up with authenticity. Yet before you open the door, pause and ask the most important question in the Buddhist canon of relationships: am I reacting from attachment or responding from awareness? The Knight of Cups brings sweet words and possible apologies, but the devil lurks behind him, smirking like a producer offering a reboot of a show that should have ended last season. The temptation isn't necessarily lust or romance, it's the lure of familiarity, the addictive comfort of a pattern you already survived. The brain loves repetition, it calls it safety. But growth demands risk. You may feel that intoxicating déjà vu whisper: maybe this time it'll work. And perhaps it will if you are not the same actor reading the same lines. The cosmos doesn't repeat lessons out of cruelty, it repeats them until the protagonist changes their reaction. That's how karma graduates into dharma, when pain transforms into purpose. So this return, whether literal or energetic, isn't a test of love but a test of alignment. Have you learned to honor your boundaries without sealing your heart in concrete? Can you offer kindness without signing up for emotional babysitting duty? Can you be generous without playing savior? These are not rhetorical questions, they re your spiritual syllabus for 2025, the year the chosen ones, those determined to evolve consciously, redefine what power looks like. Real strength is not in roaring but in deciding when silence speaks louder. If you've been visualizing reconciliation, it's certainly within reach. The cosmic gates are open, but Spirit leaves a caution note taped to them: do not just rebuild the house, reinforce the foundation. Patch the leaks of old insecurity, sweep out the dust of unspoken resentment, and install the plumbing of honest communication. Otherwise, you're repainting walls in a building still shaking from the same old fault line. In sociological terms, this phase mirrors what every society must do after conflict: truth and reconciliation, not denial and nostalgia. It requires two adults sitting at the same emotional table, acknowledging where things went wrong and committing to repair, not replay. And because humor is an essential Leo survival tool, let me add this: if they come back promising change, observe their verbs, not their adjectives. Anyone can call you amazing, fewer can actually make a plan to show up on time. So, Leo, the verdict of judgment is not about punishment or redemption, it's about evolution. You have earned the right to decide whether the story continues as romance, friendship, or memory. What matters is that your choice arises from consciousness, not habit. The past was sweet because it awakened your fire, the present is sacred because it asks you to master it. And somewhere between the two lies the quiet brilliance of maturity, the moment you realize that your light was never meant to convince anyone to stay. It was meant to guide you home. There comes a point in every Leo's story when the applause fades, the curtain closes, and silence becomes the teacher. That silence, uncomfortable yet sacred, is where the real work begins, the mirror work. For many Leos right now, the wound is not rejection but misinterpretation, the lifelong misunderstanding of being told you are too much. Too loud, too confident, too generous, too ambitious, too everything for a world that has learned to worship humility but secretly envies audacity. It's a strange punishment, isn't it? To be told that your natural brilliance is arrogance, that your desire to help is control, that your will to rise is ego. Yet anyone who's ever truly studied human nature or the fragile psychology of the insecure knows that what people often call arrogance in others is just the reflection of their own unclaimed power. In psychology, this phenomenon is called mirror wounding, and few experience it as vividly as Leo. People project their doubts, their smallness, their unfulfilled potential onto those who dare to live out loud. You, dear Leo, are a walking reminder that courage is not a speech, it's a posture. You stand tall even when the world stoops low. And that, more than your roar, is what unsettles those still living under self-imposed ceilings. This is why the cards so often show the Magician alongside the Seven of Wands in your readings. You are not just surviving, you are manifesting. But manifestation is not magic, it is disciplined consciousness. The Magician is not waving a wand for luck, he's aligning his intention with his behavior. You are doing the same, or at least learning how to. When your energy stops playing defense, constantly explaining, justifying, shrinking, and begins to play offense, creating, inspiring, teaching, that's when your blessings multiply. The shift is subtle but revolutionary. You stop asking, how can I make them understand me, and start asking, how can I make something beautiful despite them not understanding me? That's spiritual adulthood, and it's far more glamorous than any validation you were ever chasing. Still, even the lion gets tired. It's exhausting when your fire is misunderstood, when enthusiasm is mistaken for ego and boundaries are mistaken for pride. But remember what the Buddha said, the candle does not apologize for lighting other candles. The act of shining is not arrogance, it's participation in creation. Your fire is meant to spread warmth, not burn down your own house just to make others comfortable in their darkness. So don't dim your light to soothe the insecure. The world doesn't need a smaller sun, it needs steadier heat. This is what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, the fearful from the fearless, the crowd from the chosen ones. These are the souls who, despite disappointment, betrayal, or public misunderstanding, continue to lead with love when cynicism would have been easier. You, Leo, are part of that lineage. You don't heal by turning down the volume of your heart, you heal by tuning it to a higher frequency. And as you do, the future begins to clear like fog after dawn. The Six of Swords, the world, and the Seven of Cups tell a simple yet profound story, the end of confusion and the birth of clarity. You're finally sailing away from emotional turbulence into still waters. The lessons of the past, once chaotic, now arrange themselves into wisdom. For some, this closure will arrive in the form of reconciliation, not a return to the old dynamic, but a meeting of equals. For others, it will come as quiet liberation, the sweet relief of realizing you no longer need to fight for what was never yours to begin with. Either way, both endings are victories because both are guided by awareness rather than ego. You're no longer chasing peace like a distant prize, you are becoming peace itself. The World card appears twice for you because it wants to make sure you understand the distinction between loss and completion. When the World repeats, it isn't a warning, it's a diploma. You are graduating from an emotional curriculum that's been running for years. You've written essays on heartbreak, passed oral exams in patience, and aced your final in self-respect. The ceremony is bittersweet because endings always are. They ask you to mourn even what you've outgrown. But that's the paradox of evolution, the more you expand, the smaller your old cages look. Even nostalgia becomes a collar that no longer fits. This is your year of triumph 2025, and triumph isn't measured in applause, promotions, or perfect relationships. It's measured in the serenity that replaces the storm, in the grace that takes the place of resentment, in the soft confidence that whispers, "I know who I am, even if you never did." And yes, new love may be on the horizon. The Page of Cups and the Four of Wands shimmer in your spread like open windows after a long winter. Someone new, or perhaps a familiar face reborn, may arrive with sincerity and curiosity rather than chaos and confusion. But this time, you'll approach love differently, not as a rescuer, not as a performer, but as a partner who knows their own worth. You will not mistake intensity for intimacy or effort for compatibility. You will choose consciously, from a heart that's no longer wounded but wise. That is the true luxury of healing. It doesn't just change what you feel, it changes what you allow. So as you step into this next chapter, remember that the universe is not rewarding or punishing you, it's mirroring you. The outer world is simply responding to your inner calibration. When your peace becomes your priority, everything else reorganizes itself to match it. The fire that once consumed now illuminates. The same courage that once frightened others now inspires them. The same heart that once broke now beats as a compass, guiding you toward people and experiences that can finally meet you at your frequency. That is the real end of confusion and the pure beginning of clarity, the realization that nothing outside of you ever held your light. You did. You always did. Forgiveness is a word people love to embroider on throw pillows, but few ever practice in its true, muscular form. The kind of forgiveness that transforms you doesn't come from hashtags or half-hearted affirmations, it comes from nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why something so senseless still hurts. The reading this week is sharp with swords, the 3, the 9, and the Queen, symbols of thought spiraling into exhaustion. You've analyzed the story from every possible angle, replayed the dialogue like a detective looking for missing evidence, and still the ending refuses to make sense. That's because not every emotional wound is logical. Some experiences belong to the territory of the soul, not the intellect. The old Buddhist master Ajahn Chah said, "When you let go a little, you find a little peace, when you let go a lot, you find a lot of peace." He didn't mean forgive and forget in the way pop culture sanitizes pain, he meant stop gripping the blade by its edge and calling it courage. You've carried this story so long that it's become muscle memory. Part of you guards the door to the past even in your sleep, checking that the hurt stays where you left it. That vigilance is why you're tired. Healing patched the wound, but you're still standing guard over the battlefield. True letting go is not surrender, it's the quiet recognition that some energy no longer belongs to you. Hand it back to the universe like a library book you've already underlined to death. Forgiveness doesn't excuse betrayal, it just ends the lease it has on your nervous system. It's the final fire, hot enough to burn resentment but gentle enough not to scorch your compassion. Anyone can fight, only the evolved can release with love. So if you need a definition, forgiveness is emotional feng shui, moving out the old furniture so light can reach the corners again. Of course, the mind resists this. The mind wants verdicts, confessions, justice neatly filed in chronological order. The soul, on the other hand, is minimalistic. It prefers peace over proof. When you finally stop demanding that your pain make sense, you free up enormous creative bandwidth. That's when inspiration returns, relationships breathe, and mornings don't feel like post-battle briefings. Now, let's talk about the Leo truth that ties all this together, the strange, glittering paradox of being a sun in a world that keeps asking for shade. You are often misunderstood, not because you're complicated, but because you're unapologetically self-knowing. People mistake your self-trust for arrogance because they've never experienced what genuine confidence looks like. They call you too much when you're simply operating at full voltage. Yet here's the cosmic joke, while others orbit your energy, you often forget to check your own coordinates. You spend so much time nurturing everyone else's warmth that you wake up freezing. Spirit's memo for this week is short and to the point: stop apologizing for being the sun. The solar system works precisely because you shine. Dimming yourself to please the planets would be both unscientific and tragic. That doesn't mean go supernova. The goal isn't to burn brighter, it's to burn sustainably. Give love, but not as a transaction. Share warmth, but not as penance. Set boundaries not as fortress walls, but as sacred gates where you decide who may enter and for how long. In human terms, this means answering fewer texts from energy vampires, saying no before resentment makes you sarcastic, and remembering that I need rest is not an apology. Boundaries are the maintenance plan for your solar power. The Year of Triumph 2025 crowns you with a royal decree: lead by example, not by exhaustion. Those who betrayed or underestimated you have already served their purpose. They were the contrast that made your self-respect visible. Wish them well and move on. Their story doesn't end yours, it just edits the cast list for the sequel. You are entering the phase where silence becomes eloquence and self-possession becomes magnetic. Forgiveness closes the old script, and authenticity begins the new one. In psychological terms, you've shifted from external validation to internal regulation. In spiritual terms, you've remembered that peace is not earned, it's allowed. So, Leo, as you walk forward, remember this: you are not a supporting actor in anyone's narrative. You are the light source, the gravitational center, the warmth that makes growth possible. The task now is to shine responsibly, steady, generous, and self-contained. Because when the sun rises, it does not check who deserves its rays, it simply illuminates. That's your philosophy of letting go in action: to keep shining without attachment to who notices, to forgive without forgetting the lesson, and to stay luminous enough that even your silence feels like daylight. Every reading, if taken seriously, ends not with prediction but with instruction, and Leo, your final message this week reads like a masterclass in emotional architecture. The cards that close your spread, the Three of Pentacles, the Page of Cups, and the Queen of Swords, form a triad that speaks of collaboration, clarity, and conscious connection. Translation: no more guessing games, no more let's just see where this goes. If you're considering another chance with someone, treat it like building a house, not hosting a party. Bring blueprints, not just good vibes. You've graduated from relationships based on potential to partnerships based on plan. Talk about boundaries as if they were design lines, discuss needs before they become negotiations. Love, at this level, is not a mood, it's a discipline. Someone in your orbit may be ready to apologize, to renounce old habits, maybe even to evolve. That's fine. But remember the rule of grown-up spirituality: apologies are just sound waves, accountability is the miracle frequency. You can forgive words, but you rebuild only on changed behavior. Your guidance, then, is to stay soft without being spineless, to keep your empathy sharp and your expectations sharper. It's the paradox Leos must master: how to remain a warm flame without becoming a wildfire. Be open to love, but never desperate for it. Affection should flow like sunlight, not chase like spotlight. If you find your mind whispering, "What if they leave again?" reframe the fear into wisdom: "What if I outgrow them again?" Because you already did once, and the world did not collapse, it expanded. Growth has always been your superpower. The lion doesn't mourn the savannah it outgrew, it simply roams wider. For reflection, your spiritual bonus offers 3 deceptively simple questions. The first: what wound am I still protecting as if it were my identity? Many people mistake their pain for personality, polishing their scars as credentials. But you, Leo, are being asked to graduate from survival mode to creation mode. Release the parts of your story that no longer need to prove anything. The second: who was I before they disappointed me, and how can I be that person again, wiser this time? This is the art of self-reclamation. You're not trying to return to innocence, you're integrating experience. The third question: what part of me still seeks permission to shine? That's the one most Leos struggle with. You were born under the sun, yet social conditioning teaches even the radiant to ask for approval before glowing. The real awakening begins when you remember you were never waiting for permission, you were waiting for self-recognition. And so, as October's 3rd week closes, you find yourself standing on an invisible bridge between reaction and awareness. You've walked from heartbreak to heart power, from confusion to quiet command. You are, whether you like the title or not, one of the chosen ones, the souls who rebuild light after storms. Your trials weren't random, they were initiation rites. The universe isn't testing you anymore, it's crowning you. When you notice the synchronicities, the old song on the radio, the repeating number, the name that reappears in conversation, don't chase meaning, simply acknowledge it. The universe is not teasing you, it's applauding you. Every sign is a congratulatory wink saying, lesson learned. Level unlocked. Your next chapter begins not with fireworks but with calm authority, that royal stillness only true Leos possess. You've earned your peace, and it looks good on you. You've also earned the right to enjoy your life again, to travel, to flirt with possibility, to sleep through the night without checking your phone for proof of worth. Because that's what freedom feels like, ordinary joy restored to sacred status. Remember, no matter who circles back, no matter who drifts away, you remain the constant. You are the sun, and the sun never requests permission to rise. The world simply adjusts its clocks to your return. The moral, if we were to put it in plain English, is this: in the year of triumph 2025, your greatest success will not be measured by who returns to your orbit, but by who you become when they do. You've transcended survival. You've turned heartbreak into higher education. You are no longer chasing love, you are curating it. So, my dear Leo, before we end, take a deep breath and remember that life is not waiting for the perfect alignment of stars, it's waiting for you to step into the day and enjoy what you've already created. Go outside, laugh too loudly, order dessert even when you promised you wouldn't, talk to strangers who feel like kindred spirits. That's your assignment for the week, joy as spiritual practice. And if today's message stirred something real in you, if it reminded you of your worth, your fire, your divine stubbornness to rise again, then honor that resonance. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel Golden Fortune Leo. Not for algorithms, but for community. Because here, we don't just predict the future, we build it consciously, one wise, witty, and wholehearted Leo at a time.